flipping the script.
Freddy Alva, thanks for doing this.
Thank you, man.
We were on the line for about 10 seconds, and I was just about to say, you and I have been in touch for a number of years, and we hang out and do the small talk thing at hardcore shows and stuff like that. But I don't know your story. We've never like had a good get to know you session, so this is fun to do.
Right. Okay.
So let's start with I'm talking to you today because you're about to release. For those of you who don't know, Freddy is a writer and a publisher and a healer and a bunch of these are the couple of short things I know about him, but we're hoping to get into know a little bit more about him. But you're about to publish another one of your zines, so maybe start with there, and then we'll see where it goes.
Well, thank you for that incredible intro. Good, good curriculum vitae, right? Yeah, the New Breed Black Book, which I have right here. I don't know if it shows up in reverse. Yeah, it should show up good. So this came about, the third pressing of my Urban Styles book was in the planning stages. Shining Life, a really great publisher from out of DC, have graciously agreed to do a third edition of the Urban Styles book. So I was thinking of including something extra with it. Previous edition, I did a flexi, I did a compilation tape. So I was thinking, why don't we do a New Breed Black Book magazine? I've been doing Black Book series. I'm up to like my 7th or 8th, I can't remember. So yeah, it's I gather a bunch of artists that have been really inspiring to do Black Book tributes to bands in the New Breed comp. And it's not necessarily all graffiti writers, it could be visual artists. And I also tapped some people that played in bands on the comp that are also artists. So it's a great combination of people that really grew up with the compilation, that played on bands on the compilation, and they did some incredible artwork. I also asked a couple of people like Chris Wynn for In Effect to write an essay, Becky McCauley to write a little word about her favorite band on the compilation. Coincidentally, she put out a book on Shining Life called Lost Indignation, which is fabulous. So, and also got Jojo from Outburst to write some words about Mike DeJean, who his first band also played on the compilation. So it's basically it's kind of like a zine, but with graffiti and a lot of artwork in it. And it's 44 pages, and we're dropping this Friday, doing like a little release event for it.
Cool. So I'm going to go back to a couple of basics here. There's a fair amount of my crowd who's not going to know that one of the elements of hip hop is actually hardcore. And your connection into graffiti comes kind of from that era. So like, maybe let's back up and talk about what the New Breed compilation was. Because I think you are one of the quintessential DIY, anchors in the New York hardcore scene for a number of years. And maybe you can talk about kind of like who your crew that you rolled with were within that. And then I know that you were putting on shows at a famous spot called ABC No Rio, right? And then you put together this compilation. I don't know if it was before or after that. Give me a little bit of give me a little bit of hardcore when you were growing up, what years those were and what that looked like to you.
Since you mentioned hip hop, so that's basically the beginning for me as far as being involved in I guess a youth subculture. Growing up in Queens, hip hop was the thing, in my neighborhood, Chestnut Heights, Queens. Every boombox played mixtape of even before 12 it just came out, just like live shows, mixtape. So anyway, 1982 I was a total b-boy, rocking Adidas with fat laces, crease Lee jeans, the whole deal. But later on,
buckles with your name on that, or
yes I did. Well, yes I did. Nameplates. Well, I could never afford nameplates, but I did have a sheepskin though one time.
Nice.
My mom helped me out with that. And leather bombers, of course. The whole look, the whole Beach Street Crush Crew look, circa 83, 84. That's me. But then just being really into all types of music, somehow I found out about punk, the limited hardcore. So I pretty much jumped straight from hip hop to hardcore. By 1985, I had met in high school. I had met some people that were into hardcore. Mainly these Puerto Rican skinheads that I knew. They had a band called Occupied Territory, and they love this band, Bad Brains. They're always raving on the Bad Brains. Got to go see them. So I finally made it on to go see them around late 85, 86 actually, and that just like really jumped into the scene full on by then. One of the big epicenters of the scene, 86, was Some Records, started around that time. They started a stall on, I believe, on Soho, one of those like outdoor stalls. But then they got a physical space on 7th Street. So by mid 86, the whole scene just centered around Some Records. Of course, CBGB's Mayonnaise, the Pyramid shows, and hanging out with Some Records. That's where I met Chaka Malik, the person I went on to do the New Breed comp. By 1987, I wanted to get involved. I couldn't really play any instrument or do anything like that, but I had collected fanzines, and I figured, hey, I could do a fanzine. So yeah, I did one. 87, I did one called FTW, one issue, and then by 88, I did a New Breed fanzine. So I did one issue of that, just interviewing friends that had bands, like Raw Deal was in it, New York Hoods, Pressure Release, SFA. So just people I had met in the scene and had bands. And then when it came time to do the second issue for New Breed, I just had the idea, hey, why don't we do a compilation tape with all our friends' bands? And at some point, Chaka, told me the idea. He's fully into it, and we just went ahead and did it. We compiled 20 bands, either demo or live stuff. Some of the bands went to Down Furious to record. Some we just got live tapes. Chaka had this dual cassette. You could record from one cassette to another. We did a master tape, which actually I have right here. I did a little show and tell. This is the original master tape that we got all the demos in live. We compiled this tape, and from this tape we put it on Chaka's double cassette deck, and we ran like 700 copies in real time. Because if you did it like fast,
the high speed dubbing was like that new technology at the time, right?
Yeah, it was fast, but then the quality dropped for some reason. So we had to do everything in real time. So we dubbed this at Chaka's house in Woodside. Living in Jackson Heights, he was living in Woodside. And we also did
700 tapes times is that a 90-minute tape or a 60-minute tape? It was like 700 hours.
It's 90 minutes. A 90-minute tape. It's an hour long. The tape is about an hour and 4 minutes. So yeah, it was a long. Wow. But it went fast because Chaka lived on the second floor of his building, like his bedroom window faced out the courtyard, and all of our friends. He was a big skateboarding, so all these guys would be hanging outside, skateboarding outside. Our friends would drop by. So the time went like that. It was kind of like a hangout. And we also did a fanzine to go, like a 8.5 page booklet of all the bands. Submitted a lyric sheet. Chaka did some of the pages. I did the layout. And then we put everything in a plastic bag, kind of like a comic book, like a 8.5 by 11 plastic bag. The tape was in there, and the comic and the booklet. And we finished wrapping that up, everything beginning of 1989. I'm gonna say around February, because my earliest memory of we had a box of tapes and a box of fanzines, booklets. We went up to the Anthrax, taking the train up there and taking the Metro North, the Anthrax, and then being in the Metro North.
What town was the Anthrax in? Was that in Norwalk? Or was
Norwalk? It's Norwalk or New? It was a second location.
New Haven?
So it's
Okay.
New Haven.
Right.
I'm not correct. I know it was a second location.
Okay.
But on the train,
this is a little before my time. So.
Together. Yeah, so 89. It's got to be at the beginning, early 89, like February. Because Some Records actually just closed, so unfortunately we never sold the tape at Some Records. But yeah, that was the first place we took it at Anthrax, and I just remember someone picked us up from the train station, then we got off at the end walking with the boxes, and kids just like swarmed us, Oh
yeah. Did they know it was coming or what?
Yeah. A lot of people. Chris Daly for Smorgasbord, Pressure Release were half Connecticut, half New York band. So yeah, a lot of people, a lot of kids knew that we're bringing it up there, so it's like a big deal. I mean, we sold out like in 20 minutes all all the tapes. So yeah, that's my earliest memory. And then we did the same thing at CDGB's matinees. We sold it outside. We sold it through the mail. And I don't think we ever really put it in the store, but See Here fanzine store. We put a couple of See Here fanzines, but we never sold any stores.
No, oh man, this conversation can go 100 different places. But you worked
It
at
is,
See
it
Here for a
is,
minute,
yeah.
right?
Yes,
For
I
kids who
did,
don't
yes.
know, See Here was like the internet before the internet. Like See Here was the prototype for Google if you were into punk rock. It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like you would
exactly.
go there and like be looking through all these zines for every band that
Yeah,
you heard of or didn't or hadn't heard of or yeah.
yeah. For those that know, See Here fanzines was a store located on 7th Street between First and Second Avenue. All they carried was fanzines and music books, and it was a small little like 300 square basement, but it was like punk rock, hardcore heaven.
Yeah.
Every fanzine you could think of. That's what kind of inspired me to do a fanzine. So I've been going there religiously since 86, 87. And in 1991, I actually got a job there. I just happened to, I did bring in my fanzine over. So I got to know the owners, the workers, and I happened to be there when someone just left. So I got the job to work at C. I worked there for about a year and a half, from 91 to middle of 92. And that was, this is incredible. Just, I wish I had, I'm a pack rat, I collect a lot of stuff, but I wish I collected more, like just one of everything I ever saw down there. It was just insane. And I met so many people, and not just hardcore punk. It really opened my eyes to the whole like underground culture. Research the whole modern tribalism, like tattoo stuff, experimental films like Richard Kern, Leader Lunch. It just opened me to like
Yeah.
whole wide spectrum, not just punk hardcore. So just an
Well,
incredible experience.
yeah, I mean, you've touched on so many
Yeah.
so many things that are going to be foreign to a lot of my listeners already, right? So like
Okay.
first of all, in that period of time, 91 was before the city repealed the law that had tattoo shops out of commission, right? I think the tattoo
Okay.
shops only started opening up in the later 90s in New York, right? So tattoo culture in New York was kind of an underground thing.
Right.
Um, we passed right over the Puerto Rican skinhead thing, and a lot of people are going to be, their heads are going to be spinning on that one. But in your background, you're Latin American, right? Did you grow up
Yeah.
in New York totally, or did you come here as a kid?
Born in Peru. I came here in 79. I was 9. So yeah,
Okay.
I grew up. Yeah. So I went to up to 4th grade. I went to school in Peru.
Okay. So when you first met Puerto Rican skinheads, did you have any idea of what skinheads were, and did you have a picture of them as racist white people first, and then you're like, "Oh, this isn't quite matching," or you're
No,
like,
no, no, not at all.
"No,
Not
not
at
at
all.
all."
Because not at all.
Your
Like
first version
my
of it was these guys.
well, if you go to like a matinee at TVGB circa late 85, early 86, it was such a mixed crowd. You see black skins, Spanish skinheads. It wasn't like I would say my first inkling of white power, like skin, maybe later on, maybe like when this whole like American Front, all that made it like more than Downey. That's like 87, 88 probably.
Okay.
That's when I guess I really more awareness and whole, of course, Screwdriver and Blood and Honor magazine and all that stuff. But yeah, when I first started going there, it was just no, it was so inclusive as far as like racially diverse. It didn't
Right.
matter. It was just more like what you were, you're a skinhead or a metalhead or a new wave guy. And the thing that made it really great for me to find common ground at that scene is meeting people like Chaka, who had grown up like me, been into hip hop, and then transitioned to hardcore. People like
Mm-hmm.
Gingy,
Mm-hmm.
Sergio Vega, all these guys. They're all just Sergio was writing graffiti in like 1984. He's up on the 4 line. So all these guys just really. It wasn't so unusual. It was like a somewhat natural transition moving on from hip hop to that very specific New York hardcore vibe. When
Right.
I got to go later on, it didn't really happen. The rest of the country, really.
Yeah. It's so interesting because you were probably one of the first people I met who's on the level of geekiness that I am, and kind of being a amateur anthropologist, right? So I
Right,
think about
right.
like I'm a little bit younger than you, and I got into um, that ska revival scene in the early '90s, and like that's probably how I started to hear about subculture stuff. But the skinhead thing was like mods and skinheads and rockers; those were like the earliest of subcultures. Um, in England, that kind of like was the
Right.
precursor to what
Exact.
punk rock
Right,
did.
right.
If
Uh-huh.
you were a kid into punk rock in like 1983, and you were like, "Hey, what's the style?" Well, punk rock had already like just come onto the scene and was like a big thing in the media. The skinhead thing was like a weird one because like you had to go deep in digging to like learn about that one. It wasn't very accessible
Right,
until, like you said, the cable news thing kind of
right,
sensationalized it with
right.
the boneheads and shit like that.
Well,
So
I would say there was an American skinhead version. Um, Not so much like Doc Martens. Like I just it was more like combat boots. So I guess it was like an Americanized version of it, either through lack of information or lack of the proper clothing.
mhm.
So people just made
Yeah, it
their
was more
own kind of
connected to
fashion.
hardcore, right?
Yeah, more hardcore, like the flannel look, like combat boots, like a bandana on it. So it's a more Americanized, hardcore skinhead version of it. That's my take. That's the first thing I encountered. And later on, I learned there was like a British um, before that inspired that, but the
Mhm.
American skinhead hardcore culture, that's what I encountered at first.
So what's interesting where I was going with that is that you have to do a little bit of homework and kind of figure it out, but then it's mixed with this DIY culture of kind of making it up as you go along.
Right.
And you seem to be like super steeped in the DIY. You're a small business owner and you work for yourself now. Your whole career,
Well,
from
no,
what I gather, right?
well, no, I work now. I do
Okay.
lately past before, so I do work for a company now, but I still do stuff on my own. But yeah, just the nature of my business. I'm a acupuncturist.
Hmm.
Just the nature of the business. You do a lot of freelance, or so just the nature of my business.
So punk rock and graffiti and hip hop, particularly in the early years, that DIY thread was really strong. And I guess what I was going to ask you is like, as hip hop got bigger and bigger, and you started kind of going into punk rock, do you think that that was the thing that kind of drew you in that direction? Was like the DIY aspect of it?
Um, yeah, the more being more involved, like the hardcore scene, they seem it asks a lot more of you to do,
Hmm.
like be involved. Like hip hop, you could just go to a concert or hang out at a club,
Hmm.
unless you're a performer. If you want to do like a mixtape or something like that, but it seemed hardcore just um more active in different
Hmm.
ways. You don't have to be particularly musically talented, but you still participate in some way of fashion. Yeah,
Yeah.
it seemed more labor intensive. You could put more work
Hmm.
into it. It was definitely smaller too. Hip hop, by mid '80s had just blown up. As you know,
Yeah.
hardcore was still pretty much on the radar until you know '91, the year punk broke and all stuff, and that blew up too.
Right.
Um, but the cool thing about hardcore, even though it got huge, um, no effects or the whole warp tour and all that stuff,
Yeah.
there was always like alternative underground hardcore scene that yeah, you saw huge tours, but you didn't really have to be a part of that. You could still maintain a more the alternative side of the hardcore
Right.
scene. And hip hop, to an extent, you could do that in the '90s as a whole backpacker rap scene,
Hmm.
more DIY. But that kind of just got crushed in my view. It just became like um, mainstream rap.
Yeah. Yeah. That thing about kind of the permeable, like with hardcore, particularly in the early years or in the smaller portions of the scene, it's like um the singer coming down into the audience coming up and off of the
Right.
stage, like that line was like,
It's
you
blurred,
know,
or it was non-existent, as opposed to in hip hop. You wanted the more popular you got, the more you wanted to. There was the crowd and the performer. So yeah,
yeah.
that was another thing. Yeah.
And I think there's also something about kind of like where graffiti blends into that line with punk rock and hardcore is like there's a rawness to it that the more hip hop side of the graffiti culture, there's an expectation of kind of like that battle and showing improve, and versus kind of like, you know, four chords and the truth, like just do it. It doesn't matter how good
Right,
you
exactly.
are. You'll
Yeah,
get good if you do it enough. And I think
right.
there's something about those kind of like two polar opposite ends of the spectrum within music, and then within where graffiti crosses over with that, it emerges
Oh,
in a lot of ways. Because
oh, definitely. That's yeah, I could say definitely see the correlation. Like graffiti, you know, you don't need permission to do
mm-hmm,
it. And one of the great things about graffiti, you don't actually have to be particularly. I mean, there's people that are really talented. You don't have to be actually particularly good, but just through repetition and getting up, you
mm-hmm,
can achieve whatever level of success you want to do it. And I would say the hardcore maybe the same thing. You know, like there are some incredible hardcore bands, but some other ones just plug at it. You know, they're passable, but you still achieve a learned amount of success at that.
yeah. Do you think you could recognize, um, like back in those early days, like a lot of bands in the hardcore scene come out of Jackson Heights era? Did there that area have its own sound to it? Like, you know, I know,
Right,
like I'm again, I'm trying to draw relationships on like hand styles, and like when you start looking at people, you're like, oh, so and so from Brooklyn, particularly in early years before media started kind of saturating it.
right.
CBGB's is obviously the place that it all kind of came to, or A7, or, you know, there's a couple of places there, but there were definitely like eras and places and kind of creative circles where people were kind of creating sounds that were unique to their own, right?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you mentioned Jackson Heights. One of the main architects of that, I guess, sound is even though most of the band weren't from Jackson Heights, the singer was from Jackson Heights. Raw Deal, who became Killing Time. He's Anthony Cominale. He was a Jackson Heights resident, and you know, he had sang before in Token Entry, who are a pretty big influential band. But when yeah, Raw Deal, 88, that type of sound that it has some in the drumming, some kind of hip hop-ish beats, but really like strong, loud choruses, kind of O-ish a little bit. Yeah, that type of sound really influenced a lot of bands in the Queens, all the other boroughs in Brooklyn, but specifically in Jackson Heights as well. Astoria, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of bands had that type of that sound, and it's fortunate enough that's what that we wanted to capture that sound in New Breed, and
Mm-hmm.
I could say what we did. A lot of the bands have that type of vibe. You know, you hear like something in the air, like outbursts, under pressure, uppercut. It's that type of vibe that you hear. It's very specific.
Yeah, and it's very, if not very Jackson Heights, very New York compared to like a lot of
Very
stuff that was going on outside of New York in the hardcore scene in the late
right,
'80s and
exactly,
early '90s, right?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, definitely.
Um, was there a period of time where, uh, I mean, in my mind, because I started coming around 5 years after that, it seemed like that was kind of the golden age. Like 88, 89 seemed like, looking at old flyers and stuff, like there was stuff going on every weekend, multiple times during a weekend. It was just like New York
Right.
just had a gravitas to it. Um, did it seem like the circle of people in the scene where, you said earlier, it feels like it kind of like demands a uh, um,
Participation.
participation from you?
Yeah.
Do you feel like part of that was the time, or the fact that the media has changed since then with the internet, or do you feel like it was just kind of one of those magic moments, um, or was it just
Um.
kind of like, you know, your glory years when you were kind of like coming up, and it's hard for all of us to not think that
Yeah.
like
It's yeah. Looking back, I mean,
16
it's
through 25 or
yeah,
whatever is like,
yeah,
you know, all of our favorite memories.
yeah. It's easy to romanticize it. You know, everything's better. I can only speak from my own experience. Yeah, the years you mentioned, 89, maybe it was just explosion of activity going on. And funny enough, by the time 90, it's sort of weird, when 1990 came around, I'm going to say like two-thirds of the bands in Newburycom, they stopped, you know, disappeared. It
Mm-hmm.
was sort of weird. It was like, maybe also age-wise, a lot of people on the comp that people I grew up with, they got out of hardcore, they moved on, or they got married, or joined the army. So it's like a weird, like transitional thing going on. It's right when the decade when it came to the 1990s, um, make it attributed to youth, energy, um, like thinking that, you know, speaking of working at C here in '91, so I was working full time at C here. I was doing shows at ABC No Rio, booking shows. I was doing a record label as well, and going to school like part time. So it was like, yeah, I can't believe I did all that stuff. How many hours in one day you could do all that stuff, and hanging out at shows too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just part of you. I guess everyone has that. When you look back at a certain period of your life when it's like hugely active, and lucky enough, it was that particular period where a lot of things happened in that time. Then that still resonates like decades later. I'm not just saying because I was part of it, but kids that weren't even born yet, they're like drawn to that era. Either musically or aesthetically, or they're just drawn to that vibe. And it's not a retro thing either. It's like it's like homage. It's just like they just connect to it, and they want to do something along the same lines, and not a copycat version, but just they just feel it.
Yeah. What can you tell me? Kind of going back to the theme of kind of demanding your participation and kind of your involvement. What can you tell me about either your personal involvement or the history of a place like ABC? Because a lot of people won't know. First of all, they won't know what the environment of the Lower East Side was like when ABC started, and they won't know what ABC is. But can you give me a little bit of that?
Well, geographically, I could locate it. So if everyone knows, like everyone that's learned the history, CBGB is located in a very rough area, Lower East Side. ABC New Rio was like 15 blocks Lower East Side than that. So when Mike Bush started doing the first shows in December of '89, it was it was still told crack epidemic was raging. Heroin was being sold on every block on Rivington Street, where ABC New Rio was located. So when I went down to the first matinee, I knew Mike from CBGB's, and I think the first thing I said, "Hey Mike, hey, how you doing?" First thing, I think one of the first things he said to me, "Hey, doing good. Hey, you want to help out? Pick up a broom, clean this up." So that's what I mean. It's you're not just like a spectator; you actively get involved. So like, yeah, I picked up a broom and cleaned up, and I just got involved, like slowly helping out, putting on the shows. And by the time summer of 1990 came around, Mike Bush he wanted to go on a cross country summer bike trip. So he's like, "Hey, do you want to continue doing the shows?" Like sure. I've kind of been helping out, kind of know what to do now. So that's what I mean. I mean, it's like hands-on training. You learn from others as you go along, and you just get involved. And not just myself, so many people that I've met also got involved. Even you didn't have to, play an instrument or do a fanzine or take photos. You could still be involved in some way, either like working the door or cleaning up or running a show. There was always some task you could be assigned to do. So yeah, I really gravitated to that. It made you more aware of what you were doing and why you were doing it. It's an exchange of just being like passively watching something.
Were people? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask: were people living in ABC at the time? Like, was it abandoned buildings on the left and right of it? Was it a full-on spot where people were living there? Were they just putting shows on there? Like, what did that look like?
Technically, it was. If you know the history, ABC was a building that was abandoned by the owners that were left vacated. So it was like a weird gray zone that they kind of own it, but they had abandoned it. So in 1980, an artist collective had kind of squatted the building.
As early as 1980.
Yeah, it goes back as early 1980. So yeah, 9 years before we started the first matinee, there was a whole history of experimental theater, avant-garde music, political meetings. There's a whole history pre the hardcore matinee. So yeah, to answer your question, technically there was, I could say, there was one person living there, but not supposed to be there. But it wasn't like the whole. Yeah.
I just wanted a general vibe.
Yeah. It wasn't like the whole building was. It was like one person there, and that was just to kind of take care of space when no one was there.
Okay.
And later on, as if you know the history, later on, through a law passed that if you're shown that you can done some improvements to a place you squatted, you could buy the place in the building, and that's what happened to ABC New Rio. They legally bought the building, and did some improvements, and there were some people living there as well.
And that we only have a couple of minutes left on this one. We don't need to go on forever.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
But the nature of that vibe, kind of talking about style and aesthetics and things like that, it took on a different feel than like CB's or A7 because of the nature of the way the collective kind of worked to put it on,
exactly.
right? And was graffiti a part of that scene or that time? Like I remember being there in the '90s, and the backyard was all bombed out and
right.
Like that. Did those scenes cross over at all at that space?
Well, in 1989, at the same time we were doing the mayonnaise at the late '89. Sane had his first and only exhibition at ABC New Rio. So there was and he also, as you know, he did the back wall, the famous American Pie. He also did the front, for the longest time, the ABC New Rio sign in the front in the early '90s. That was his piece. Revs also got involved. His band also played ABC New Rio several times in '92. Not his older band, but his band in the '90s called God Squad. They played several times at ABC New Rio, and he did some of the metal artwork on the door that's gone now,
like a gateway. Yeah.
Exactly, a gateway. Yeah. So there was that sort of graffiti, but not obviously a lot of people. When Byrne played, Nats, all the Stack, all those graffiti writers come down and take up the place, but there wasn't a direct link graffiti like the whole new scene sprung up by 1990. So newer bands like Born Again, Sins, Arrest, Rorschach, Go, they never used any kind of graffiti type iconography under flyers or whatever, even though a couple of the bands did have people that grown up doing graffiti, but it wasn't that like really obvious overt crossover, as opposed to stuff like the New Breed. We see like a lot of writers in the bands that were actually tag up their band's name. So it was more under the radar, I would say.
Gotcha. So we're gonna run out of time. I'm gonna ask you one last question.
Okay.
I know that asking you for your favorite is like a favorite child, right? So I don't want to ask you on like the New Breed who your favorite artist is and that's what I will ask you though, because you said that you're a collector. If you could get one piece of paraphernalia, one piece of like New York hardcore history, like an original flyer art or something like that exemplified your love of hardcore and graffiti, what's that one piece that like really was like, oh, that's the piece that is graffiti and hardcore at the same time that I really, it just holds that spot in your head?
That's a tough one. The one I thought of immediately wasn't graffiti, but was like kind of like punk and rap.
Okay.
Which I'll mention anyway, and maybe I'll think of the graffiti one. But I would love a flyer 1982 when the Clash played Bonds, and Grandmaster Flash opened for them. If you know the history, like Grandmaster Flash opened them, and people were like throwing beer cans at Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. It was like almost like a riot, those like it was really crazy scenes. I would love the actual flyer, the Grandmaster Flash opening up for the Clash. But as far as the graffiti thing, I would think something Revs did, like when he had a band called Adam 12, and they almost played. This is his first punk band in '84, and they actually almost played. It's a funny story. They were supposed to play A7 in '84. As they were going down the block, St. Mark, someone bumped into them. Oh, where are you going? Oh, we're playing A7. Like, oh no, it just closed. So they never played A7. But they played CBGBs. But I remember Reds telling me he did an Adam 12 mural somewhere down there. I would love just like picture that signifies to me like Reds. Unfortunately, people like I talk about in my book like Frontline. They never did anything related to their band, to graffiti. Even Frontline, in my mind, like the originals of that graffiti and New York hardcore mix, even though they never really, they were all graffiti writers, but when they did the frontline, they never did anything like a piece on the train, same frontline or anything like that. Yeah, so it's between those two. Like, if there was a frontline, I'm trying to rack my mind. There was never any like frontline thing that was done either by Mackie or the other guys. I wish they had that. So that would be my wish. Something that never appeared.
Right on.
But a frontline piece that Mackie could have done in 1980, he could have easily done in 1982 on the one train with all the rest of the guys from frontline, like Me 62 and Noah. They could have rocked an incredible frontline whole car.
Right on.
But that never happened. But I wish it could have happened.
Cool. So, Freddie, where can people get the new Urban Styles book and the New Breed zine?
Okay, sure. So the New Breed, the same thing. The New Breed Black Book is the order link is going up this Wednesday. You can go to either follow my Urban Styles _book link for info, or go to Urban Styles NYHC Big Cartel. So that's the order link. Will go up on Wednesday. Friday, we're doing a release event for it at Skin Trade Tattoos, which is on the 39th Street between 35th Street between 9th and 10th Avenue. And a lot of writers like FC, Chaka, yourself, hopefully coming down, Chris RWK, a lot of writers that did pages on the book will be there. So you can sign their page. We'll have, I'm also doing a limited edition MQ Urban Style shirt I'll have at the show. Just did like 50 shirts. So yeah, that's Friday night, 6 to 9 p.m. 35th Street, 9th and 10th Avenue, close to Penn Station, Port Authority. It's the safest block in Midtown. It's a police station right in the middle. So
it's safer than any of the blocks that you've been talking about for the last half hour.
Yes. So you have any, trepidation about, I know you heard the stories about Midtown going crazy. It's the safest block in Midtown because there's like literally a police station right in the middle of the block. So you'll be okay. So that's going down. Ironic enough, the whole Black Book was supposed to be timed with the third edition of my Urban Styles, but we got the Black Book done so fast that actually the Urban Styles won't be out till January.
All right, right on.
But the Urban Styles is standing on its own, so it's fine. So we'll have it there, and then when the Urban Styles, the third edition, is scheduled to drop now third week in January. So we'll have that. We'll do a package deal with the zine and the Urban Styles as well.
Right on.
So that's what's going on. Thank you, man. Thank you.
I appreciate this. I hope people enjoy this, and I hope they get the new zine and the new book when it comes out. All right, have a good one. Thanks.
Oh, bye. Take care.
Flipping the script.